The light of the divine flows through us all. And what that means is that our soul is an eternal living entity. And that when somebody we love dies, he or she does not disintegrate into nothingness, but they live on in eternity. And that our relationship with somebody that we love transforms from one of a physical nature to one of a spiritual nature. So the reason that mediumship exists is to help people understand that life truly is everlasting.
Is interdimensional communication, mediumship, is that always with spirits, people who've passed on, or is it possible with somebody who isn't dead, perhaps somebody who's in a coma?
Yeah, interdimensional communication is the term that I developed in Evidence of Eternity to describe what I do, because we're actually communicating with a different dimension. And, you can use a medium like myself to facilitate that, or you may have a spirit come to you in a dream state, or you may get the proverbial, I saw their spirit, because there is direct contact. Also, a near-death experience is a form of interdimensional communication, as is a deathbed vision. And a DBV, a deathbed vision, is when somebody is in the process of dying and bystanders, could be family, close friends, but also hospice and healthcare workers, start detecting and seeing and experiencing sensations, what the person who's dying is. But in my work, I have been able to communicate with the consciousness of people who have not physically died. And this happened fairly recently. In fact, I was speaking to this woman. Her name is Mary. She called me and told me that her son, he was only 20 years old, they found him face down in the pool. He'd been grappling with brain cancer, and he'd been going for treatments, and apparently he went into the swimming pool and he must have had a seizure, and that he was now in ICU on life support, and the doctors wanted she and her husband to make the decision to terminate life support. And she called me up, and she was, she's such a sweet person. And she said, Mark, she said, can you see if you can get hold of my parents? I need some guidance now, because her parents had passed. And so I opened up my brain to higher frequencies, and the spirits of her parents came through, and then the spirit of her son came through. And she said, but he's not dead yet. And I said, well, that's true, but he's still energetically linked to his body. And I said, he wants to talk to the Capricorn, the Capricorn, the Capricorn. All of a sudden, a male voice comes on the phone. He says, I'm Mikey's father. I'm the Capricorn. And he, the father's name is Mike, and they called the son Mikey instead of Mike Jr. And the message was, when the two of you are ready to make the decision, you'll make the right decision. And of course, I know what skeptics are going to say. Well, of course, that's what the medium's going to tell them. But then the difference between someone who's cold reading and the real thing is when I receive verifiable facts that I couldn't possibly know. Because then I said to the father, he keeps saying Greggy and Georgie, or Greggy or Giorgio. And the father said, whoa. He said, a joke between the two of us, he calls me Giorgio. Now, I didn't know this, but the spirit did. So they waited another couple days and made the decision to terminate life support. And just as they were about to, a young man walked into the ICU, and Mary and her husband couldn't believe it, because it was a foster child that they took care of, who was a very close friend of their son, and they've kept in contact. And his name was Greg, but his nickname was Greggy. And I received both Giorgio and Greggy, and Mary realized that Greggy was supposed to be there when they were terminating life support. And they said, Greggy, why are you here? And he said, I heard about this, but for some reason, I just knew I had to be here right now. So in situations like that, the spirit of her son, while his body was not physically dead, was able to communicate with me. And this yet is further proof that the brain only hosts consciousness, it doesn't create it. Because if he was brain dead, then how would neurobiologists be able to explain that his consciousness was not only able to move around and communicate with me, but give me his father's nickname of Giorgio, and then foresee a future event of how Greggy was going to be there at the precise moment that life support was to be terminated.
Wow, that is just an incredible story. I want to rewind just a bit to when you were first telling it. I don't remember the exact phrase you used. I apologize for that. But you mentioned how you raised the frequency in your brain. What was the phrase you used, and how does that work? Is that something everybody can do, or is that something that only a fourth generation psychic can do?
I say when I open up my brain to higher frequencies, I'm really glad that you asked that, because interdimensional communication, whether it's through a medium or a deathbed vision or near-death experience, or and everybody doesn't have to be a medium to have a mediumistic experience. It's like we can all swim, but we're not all going to be Michael Phelps. What we have to look at it is there's 4 different types of brainwave frequencies. There's beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Right now, you and I are in the beta state. That's why we're able to talk and function, write checks, drive our car. That's when you're awake. And then when you start to drift off or meditate, you go into alpha. Alpha is that nice relaxed state. And then theta is sleep. But on the alpha theta border is when psychic and mediumistic activity occurs. And the brainwave frequency there is conducive to this. That's why spirits appear to people so many times in dreams, because people will be accepting of an experience in the dream state. And for some reason that neurobiologists are still not able to explain, is people like me are able to turn this on while I'm in the beta state. So I'm going from beta to alpha theta within seconds, when normally that takes hours. So what's happening is I'm raising my frequency. The spirit is bringing his or her down, or theirs down, because they usually show up in a group, and we get a frequency match. So I hope that explains it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good segue into my next question, because this is called the Beyond the Veil Summit. I'd like to ask, in your estimation, in your experience, what is the veil?
I don't really use the term the veil, but I understand what it is. Here's how I explain it. We live in what I call the material world. Now, once again, referencing Albert Einstein, there is no matter. There's no matter. There's just energy which vibrates at different frequencies so as to be perceptible to the senses. So look at our material world as AM radio, okay? It has a slower frequency, a high amplitude, okay, but slower frequency. And the other side, the spirit realm, as FM radio. So there are 2 energetic systems which coexist and run parallel to each other. They both use frequency and energy. It's just that FM radio's, moving at such a higher vibration. And the veil, which is what most people refer to it, but I call it the interdimensional zone, is when the 2 frequencies overlap. And that can occur in spirit communication through a medium, or through a mediumistic experience. Let's say you're driving down the road and you just feel compelled to turn on the radio, and there's that song that makes you think of your loved one who passed. Or if you smell a scent of a familiar, perfume or whatever it is that's associated to somebody, but there's no source for it. Or you have a dream or a near-death experience. All of those are the interfacing between the 2 dimensions, ergo interdimensional communication. One of the common terms is the veil. So we're talking about the same thing. It's just I tend to go for more technical explanations, because I think it's important for us to speak in 21st century terms when understanding the afterlife. Mediumship and spirit communication, a lot of the terminology was coined during the Victorian era of the mid to late 19th century, because that's when spiritualism in England, France, and the US became very popular. but a lot of the terminology and the understanding has stayed, in this arcane period. And I think that now that we're in the 21st century, we need to start using more up-to-date and more accurate terminology to describe this.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey, at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.